The hearing room was packed. Rows of sharp suits, anxious aides, flashing cameras, all focused on one man, Speaker Mike Johnson. Outside, thousands had gathered, holding signs that read, "Protect the vote," "Faith is not a weapon," and "Justice for all." Inside, it was different, colder, stiffer, more calculated. Johnson's voice rang out confidently as he quoted scripture after scripture. He called the proposed Voting Rights and Criminal Justice Reform Act morally dangerous. He spoke of order, of righteousness, of divine law. But as he spoke, a young mother in the front row quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. Her son, Malik, had been jailed at 16 for stealing food. He never came home. As Johnson continued defending policies that destroyed families like hers, that mother stared forward, hands trembling. No one interrupted, no one pushed back, until Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett quietly raised her hand. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. "Mr. Speaker," she said, her voice soft but clear. The room went still, because everyone felt it. Something was about to change, forever. "Faith," Jasmine began slowly, "is not a shield to hide behind. It's a light, and today, that light feels dim." Mike Johnson didn't look at her, not yet. "Families are broken," she continued, her eyes scanning the room. "Not because they're ungodly, but because we passed laws that make poverty a crime." She told the story of Jerome, a 19-year-old from rural Mississippi, convicted for possession. First offense, 10 years. His grandmother died before she could see him free again. People shifted in their chairs. Cameras zoomed in. "You use scripture," Jasmine said, her voice still calm, "to call this bill a threat. But I ask you, is it moral to keep men locked in cages for survival? Is it holy to silence voices just because they come from neighborhoods like mine?" She paused. Then she looked directly at Johnson. "You hide behind scripture to silence justice." Gasps, audible, raw. The speaker blinked, but he said nothing. Even the cameras didn't move. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman. She was every mother, every son, every buried truth this room refused to hear. And they all heard her now. Speaker Johnson finally leaned forward. "Congresswoman Crockett, I will not be lectured on faith," he said, his tone cool but shaking slightly. Jasmine nodded gently, not backing down. "I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to remind." Then she held up a small, worn Bible. It wasn't her own. It belonged to her father. A quiet man who raised her in a one-bedroom home in Dallas, reading the Psalms every night. He believed in grace, in dignity. He was arrested at 52, Jasmine said, for voting while on parole. He didn't know it was illegal in Texas. The man in the back row let out a shaky breath. Jasmine opened the Bible to Matthew 25. She read slowly, painfully, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." She closed the book. "Tell me, Mr. Speaker, when we let thousands lose their right to vote, who are we serving?" Johnson had no answer. None was needed, because by now the room had shifted. It wasn't about the bill anymore. It was about a mirror, and who dared to look into it. A young Capitol security guard stood by the chamber doors, still as stone. But his eyes were red. Jasmine had just told the story of her father's arrest. The man watching her from the door remembered his own father's story too well. Wrong place, wrong skin, wrong sentence. That same father had worked night shifts for years just to get his son through community college. And now that son stood guard over the same leaders who passed laws that ruined men like him. As Jasmine continued, her voice like a steady river, the guard wiped a tear. He didn't even notice the C-SPAN camera catching it. But the internet did. By morning, that tear would be seen by 3.2 million people. Inside the chamber, Jasmine spoke of LaTanya Brooks, a grandmother in Louisiana arrested for ballot harvesting. All she did was help 5 seniors mail in their ballots. She spent 47 days in jail. She missed her granddaughter's birth, Jasmine said, her voice cracking for the first time. The silence was loud. Even Mike Johnson's eyes twitched. No one interrupted. No one could, because what Jasmine was building wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a reckoning. Jasmine reached into her folder and slowly unfolded a crumpled sheet of paper. "This letter," she said softly, "was found in a prison cell in Huntsville, Texas. It was never sent." She cleared her throat. "Dear Mama, I heard Malik got into state. I'm proud of him. I know I won't be there to shake his hand. I hope he understands I tried. They told me I'd be out by last Christmas, then changed it again. Please tell him not to be angry at the world. Be angry at the system. But don't let it turn him cold. Love." Troy. Jasmine looked up. Troy was 17, convicted of stealing a car. He served 6 years. But what broke him wasn't prison. It was realizing he became invisible to the country he was born in. Even the marble walls of the chamber felt warm with pain now. A Republican aide lowered her phone, eyes glassy. She'd just remembered the black kid from her high school. Quiet. Vanished sophomore year. No one ever asked why. Jasmine folded the letter. "We can't keep pretending justice is blind when we're the ones closing our eyes." No one clapped. It wasn't a moment for applause. It was a funeral for silence. Speaker Mike Johnson shifted in his seat, visibly tense. "Congresswoman Crockett," he finally said, "with all due respect, faith has always guided our laws. It is our foundation." Jasmine nodded gently. "But faith is not a fist, Mr. Speaker, and we've turned it into one." She walked to a whiteboard and wrote 2 words, Jamarcus Daniels. He was stopped for a broken tail light in Georgia. No warrant, no prior. He asked why he was being handcuffed. The officer said, "Because I can." A sob caught in the throat of someone seated behind Johnson. Jasmine continued. They found his Bible in the back seat, pages torn during the arrest. Book of Isaiah, missing. She turned to the speaker. "You quoted Isaiah earlier, but I wonder, would you still quote it if it had blood on it?" The room stopped breathing. Cameras rolled. Johnson remained silent, because deep down, everyone knew she wasn't just talking to him. She was talking to America. To every politician who ever clung to holy words while stepping on holy people. To every lawmaker who forgot that scripture without mercy is just noise. And in Jasmine's silence after those words, America heard itself weep. Halfway through her testimony, Jasmine glanced at the front row, where a seat marked "Reserved for Public Witness Number 4" remained painfully empty. She paused. "That seat was meant for Rosa James," she said, steadying her voice. "She lost her 19-year-old son in a prison altercation. His name was Elijah. He'd been jailed for a nonviolent marijuana charge. First offense. He died waiting for his trial date." A gasp escaped from a woman in the back. "She wanted to be here today," Jasmine said. "But this morning she had a stroke." She held up a photo, Rosa, in a church dress, holding Elijah's senior portrait. "She told me she forgives the system, but not the silence." A hush fell over the room. Johnson lowered his head briefly, but only briefly. Jasmine turned to him. "You speak of law and order, but this is not order. This is absence. That seat is empty, and so is the promise we keep making to families like hers." She let the silence linger. Even the stenographer's keys slowed. Because that seat wasn't just empty, it was a mirror, and everyone saw someone they'd lost in it. The tension in the chamber turned brittle. Jasmine stepped back to the mic, holding something small, a folded piece of cloth. The edges were frayed. It was a prison prayer cloth. This was stitched by a man named Curtis Wright, in solitary confinement for 13 months. He went blind after a botched eye surgery that was delayed because the prison couldn't find a driver. She placed the cloth gently on the table. He prayed for mercy every night. Not release, not freedom, just mercy. Jasmine's voice cracked again. "And do you know what he got?" She paused. The camera zoomed in. An extra towel. Gasps and groans filled the room. A few tears, muffled by hands. Jasmine turned to Johnson. "You invoke mercy from the pulpit of power. But do you know what mercy looks like? It looks like silence in a cell. It smells like bleach and regret. And sometimes, it's just a towel." Speaker Johnson blinked, swallowed. The prayer cloth sat like a sacred relic between them. In that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't testifying. She was ministering. And America, for once, didn't interrupt. Jasmine raised her hand once more and asked for the last exhibit. An aide stepped forward carrying a children's backpack. "This belonged to Tamia Reynolds," Jasmine said. She was 17, straight A student, first in her class. She was excited to vote when she turned 18. She unzipped the backpack slowly and pulled out a voter registration card. She filled this out at a school drive, smiling, hopeful. Jasmine held it like it was glass. But 2 weeks later, her older brother, on parole, was arrested again for riding in a car with someone who had weed. Wrong place, wrong time. Tamia was terrified. She walked home from school every day after that, alone. No headphones, just prayer. One day, she didn't make it home. She was hit by a drunk driver. He had 3 prior offenses, never served time. White, suburban, wealthy. Jasmine inhaled, slow and sharp. Tamia's mother told me the last thing she said was, "Tell Mama I still want to vote." No one could look up, not even the speaker. And as the cameras panned the chamber, the only sound was sniffles, rising like quiet thunder. Because in that backpack was the hope of a generation, and on the floor was what was left of it. Jasmine took a breath. Then she lifted a photo for the committee to see. A little boy, maybe 8, sat alone on a wooden bench, eyes wide, shoes untied. "This is Isaiah Green. I met him in a juvenile courtroom in Harris County." She paused, letting the image soak in. He was there because his mother couldn't find childcare. She left him in the car for 10 minutes while she picked up her paycheck. A passerby called the police. She was arrested for neglect. Isaiah was taken into custody. Some scoffed, until Jasmine continued. "What they don't tell you is that his mother, Keisha, works 2 jobs. She's never been arrested before. The judge gave her 6 months. Isaiah spent 3 of those months in a facility where he wet the bed every night." Jasmine's voice broke. He stopped speaking. They said it was trauma-induced silence. No one in the chamber moved. I sat with him. He held my hand. And after 10 minutes, he whispered just 2 words. "She's good." A single tear traced Jasmine's cheek. She didn't wipe it away, because some tears don't beg to be hidden. They beg to be heard. Speaker Johnson shifted again. His fingers tapped the table. But Jasmine wasn't done. She lifted a worn, crumpled Bible, its cover torn, spine taped, pages stained by time. "This Bible belonged to Terrence Monroe," she said. "A preacher's son, arrested for driving without a license, couldn't afford the fine, ended up in a holding cell for 9 days. She opened to a marked page, Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. He underlined this verse 12 times, Jasmine said softly. 12. Once for every man he met in that jail who didn't know how to read. Whispers now filled the room. quiet cries. A staffer tried to compose herself but gave up. Terrence died in that cell, Jasmine added. Dehydration. No one noticed for 18 hours. She raised her eyes to Johnson. You say the Bible is your compass. Then why does your path lead away from compassion? Johnson looked away, but everyone else looked straight at Jasmine. Because faith, real faith, isn't a podium, it's a promise. And for the first time in that room, Scripture wasn't a shield. It was a mirror. Cameras rolled, phones buzzed, live streams surged past 6 million views. But inside the chamber, time felt frozen. Jasmine stepped forward. You call these reforms radical. You say they go too far. But let me ask you this. What is more radical than leaving a man in a cage for a missed court date? She turned to the gallery, where an elderly man in a military cap had been watching silently. That's Mr. Emmett Clark, Vietnam veteran. He lost his voting rights over a clerical error, spent 2 years trying to restore them. She looked at Johnson again. He went to war for a country that forgot his name. The speaker stayed quiet. And every time you stay quiet about this, you choose the side of forgetting, of pretending it doesn't happen. But silence, Mr. Speaker, in the face of injustice, is not neutrality. She gripped the podium. It is sin. People didn't clap. They couldn't. Because Jasmine hadn't delivered a speech. She had opened a wound. And for the first time, the wound didn't bleed quietly. It bled where the whole nation could see it. Jasmine paused, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted a photo frame from her case. She didn't show it yet. This is my father, she said softly. He spent 11 months waiting for trial on a charge that was later dismissed. He missed my first high school debate, missed my college acceptance letter, missed my law school graduation, all while innocent. Her voice didn't crack. It broke. I remember visiting him through glass. He told me, "Don't let this system steal your fire." Then she slowly turned the frame toward the room. Her father, bald, kind eyes, thick glasses, smiled behind a cinder-block wall. "I am not standing here today in spite of him," she said. "I am standing here because of him." A few sniffles echoed from behind the cameras. One reporter wiped his eyes, quietly mouthing, "I didn't know." Jasmine looked at Speaker Johnson. "My father read the Bible too, every night. But he never used it to defend harm. He used it to survive it." Silence, unrelenting, soul deep. Because now this wasn't about policy. It was about a daughter still carrying the weight of a father's lost time. And the whole nation felt that weight with her. Jasmine turned on a small speaker at the witness table. Then she pressed play. It wasn't a statement. It was a song. A shaky voice sang, "I once was lost, but now am found." Then another joined in. Then another. It grew into a trembling, heart-wrenching chorus. "That," Jasmine said gently, "is a prison choir from Pennsylvania. 27 men, most of them serving life. This was recorded last Easter Sunday." Her voice softened, but her eyes hardened. "None of them will ever vote. None of them will ever walk free. But every one of them knows the Bible better than the men who claim to write laws in its name." She turned off the speaker. A chill moved through the chamber. No one asks if they've changed. No one asks who they became. We judge them for who they once were, then quote Scripture as if mercy has an expiration date. Johnson looked shaken. He reached for his water but didn't drink. Jasmine pressed her palms together. Redemption is not just for the righteous. It's for the forgotten. And today they sang for us, so we wouldn't forget again. The room didn't breathe, because in those voices was the sound of America's soul. A sharp knock echoed through the chamber. A janitor's mistake, perhaps, but it startled everyone. Jasmine took a breath. Do you hear that? That sound? That's what my cousin heard the night he was arrested. She turned, her voice now almost a whisper. 2 knocks. Then the door flew open. No warrant, no warning, just officers, guns drawn. He was 15. Gasps. Whispers. Someone had accused him of stealing a bike. The police never found it, but he spent 4 nights in juvenile detention. No lawyer, no guardian. She gripped the microphone tightly. That bike was later found in a neighbor's yard. It wasn't even his. Silence again. My cousin still flinches when someone knocks. He never went back to school. Said he couldn't sit in rooms with closed doors. Jasmine looked straight into the cameras. Imagine being so scared of justice that you run from doors for the rest of your life. A tear dropped. She didn't wipe it away, because that story, his story, wasn't unique. It was everywhere, in every state, every city, every knock that came too hard, too fast. And tonight those knocks were being answered with truth. Jasmine stood still, her fingers wrapped around a folded sheet of paper. Before I close, I want to read one more name. She unfolded the paper with reverence. Jacqueline Hart, 64 years old, North Carolina. She tried to vote in 2020, unaware that her rights had been suspended over a fine she couldn't afford. She held up a photo. Jacqueline in church attire, hand on a Bible. She wasn't arrested, but the humiliation broke her. She didn't leave her house for 2 years. Jasmine's voice trembled. She died last month, alone. Her obituary listed just one surviving relative, her grandson, Zaire. She paused. He's watching this hearing right now. He asked me to read her name, to say it in a place that would have never welcomed her voice. Jasmine stepped away from the mic, walked to the marble wall behind the speaker's chair, and whispered, "Her name belongs here." Then, softly, she pressed the paper against the wall. The camera zoomed in. Jacqueline Hart. A name. A memory. A ghost woven into justice. And in that quiet, sacred moment, thousands of viewers wept, because every name forgotten had finally been spoken. For the first time in the hearing, Jasmine turned toward Speaker Johnson. Not with anger, but with compassion. She placed a Bible on the table between them. It was her father's, leather-worn, pages loose, corners folded from years of searching. "This is what I grew up with," she said. "Not power, not podiums. Just this, and a father who taught me to read it with eyes open, not closed." She looked directly into Johnson's eyes. "You quote scripture to build walls. I was raised to use it to open doors." Then Jasmine slid the Bible across the table toward him. "Read it again," she said, "but this time, read it for them." The room was still. Johnson didn't reach for it. He looked down, fingers curled around nothing. The nation watched, 6.9 million live. And in living rooms across America, people whispered, "Please pick it up." But he didn't, because sometimes truth doesn't demand surrender, it demands reflection. And in Jasmine's final act of grace, America saw what leadership looks like. It looks like offering the truth, not forcing it. Jasmine stood to close. The bill we're debating isn't just about laws. It's about whether we believe voices from every street corner deserve to be heard. Her voice grew stronger now. "I've told you the stories. I've shown you the faces. But this is what it all comes down to. Do we lead from fear or from faith in each other?" She paused. Then she leaned in. "You hide behind scripture to silence justice," she repeated. "But justice speaks anyway. It lives in empty chairs, in torn prayer cloths, in boys who flinch when they hear the doorbell." Her voice broke. "And it lives in me." The chamber sat in total silence. Then, unexpectedly, applause. First from one staffer, then another, then the gallery, then one single clap from a member of the opposite party. Not everyone joined in, but enough did, because something had shifted. Something had been seen and couldn't be unseen. As the gavel finally dropped, the live stream surged again. Now, if you're still watching, if your heart is heavy, your eyes wet, then this moment reached you. Please, like this video. Drop a comment. Which story broke you the most? And most of all, subscribe to hear more voices like Jasmine's, because silence has lasted long enough.